Banishers Ghosts of New Eden is labeled as a narrative-driven action RPG, and I'm going to talk about that genre classification throughout the video. And it releases on February 13th, launching on PC and current-gen PlayStation and Xbox. I received a review code a few weeks ago and had a chance to complete the game, which took me approximately 22 hours or so on my first run, where I focused mostly on the main objective. Let's begin with a brief overview of what this game has to offer and its general flow before diving into specific aspects. This game is heavily narrative-driven, featuring numerous cutscenes, and while it initially feels linear and constrained, as you progress, both the story and the game world expand significantly. On the map before you, the main quest objective is highlighted by the yellow banner. However, with much of the map unlocked later in the game, there are numerous areas to revisit, many of which offer various side activities. Campfires serve as resting and fast travel points, while question marks denote points of interest offering different activities, ranging from summoning ghosts to exploring hidden treasure. Engaging in these activities can reward players with attribute boosts, gear upgrades, and skill points to invest in, I'd say, rather simple skill trees as they level up. The haunting cases indicated by blue banners on the map, some of which you will do as part of the main quest and others are optional. These allow you to delve into investigating a haunting, piecing together clues to unravel its cause. Definitely a bit of a Witcher investigation vibe going on here. Once you've gathered sufficient information by finding clues, you will face a crucial decision, whether to hold the living individual responsible for the haunting leading to their demise, or to guide the ghost towards peace, which is ascension, or condemn the ghost to a darker fate, banishment, which is kind of akin to sending a spirit to hell. These decisions are often a bit morally ambiguous, and they carry weight as they influence the dynamic between Antea and Red, which I did notice more so in the second half of the game. Moreover, they significantly impact the outcome of the game, shaping the ultimate conclusion that you'll reach. While reminiscent of Souls-like mechanics in terms of combat, this game offers a unique twist where players can switch between controlling Red in physical form and Antea in spectral form. Combat is not nearly as challenging as a Souls game, although I do want to say that it was quite engaging. And the game actually offers you the choice between 5 different difficulties, which affect not only combat, but also timers for puzzles. Although I will say puzzles are pretty minor in this game. Initially, the game may seem like a fairly generic linear experience, but it truly comes into its own beyond, I would say, the 30 to 40% mark. As you progress, skill trees expand, new gameplay mechanics like firearm usage are introduced, the map opens up, the story deepens, and you encounter an interesting cast of characters, making for what I would say was a fairly rich and rewarding experience. Alright, let's delve into specifics now, starting with the game's plot without revealing any spoilers. Like I mentioned earlier, this is undeniably a narrative-driven experience, though it is accompanied by ample gameplay. While you can skip many of the scenes and the dialogue, doing so means missing out on crucial aspects of, I guess, this game's essence, I could say. Red and Antea are Banishers, tasked with dispelling a malevolent curse through potent rituals, somewhat akin to Geralt's role as a monster hunter. It's set in the late 17th century within a fictional North American settlement called New Eden, and this story unfolds amidst tales of horror and hidden truths within this town. As lovers, Red and Antea are summoned by a friend, the minister of New Eden, to come investigate and hopefully end this town's curse. Tragically, though, Antea meets her death early in the game, an event not kept secret as it's part of the game's marketing. This isn't really a spoiler. This pivotal moment thrusts Red and also Antea in spectral form into a much deeper narrative, forcing decisions about upholding the Banisher oath by ascending Antea's soul or pursuing the morally questionable methods to resurrect her physical form. This dilemma intertwines with the haunting cases that I mentioned earlier, where blaming the living results in their demise, providing life essence for Antea's potential revival. This conflict of interest complicates Red's role as a Banisher, merging personal loss with professional duty, I guess you could say. Antea's personal feelings about this and Red's inner turmoil adds layers to the narrative, emphasizing the complexity of their characters. With Antea's death linked to New Eden's curse, the personal plot merges seamlessly with the overarching narrative of solving the town's plight. Throughout the game, players control both Red and Antea, though Red's perspective seems to dominate here in terms of who the player feels most immersed as. From a storytelling and dialogue standpoint, excluding combat, I would have preferred Antea as a pure NPC. Controlling her dialogue responses only occasionally can disrupt immersion a little bit, pulling you out of Red's role. This is a minor complaint though. I also didn't necessarily enjoy the overall treatment of Red, as he's treated kind of as a baby, which can get a little annoying over time, especially because you feel like you're playing as Red, but once again, that's a rather minor negative in the scope of the game. This game boldly promises players that their decisions will shape the outcome of their journey, a claim I initially perceived as mere marketing hype during the first half of the game. However, as the story unfolds, particularly in the latter half and at its conclusion, it becomes evident that the choices made specifically during those haunting cases wield significant influence over the game's finale. While some other choices may have minor effects on the world prior to the end, that aspect of the game feels much more minor when compared to actually affecting the conclusion. On your initial playthrough though, distinguishing between the illusion of choice and actual choices that have true consequences is a bit hard to do, which works in the game's favor as you treat every decision as an important one. The developers at Don't Nod in the past mentioned 5 distinct endings, a claim that I think is true now that I've experienced my own, I would say, somewhat unique ending, which just can't be the only ending that the game offers. I didn't have time to test more endings though. Initially, I was disappointed with how my ending turned out, but I later realized that I kind of deserved it, and I also kind of respect the devs' boldness with giving me such an ending. While many may be tempted to backtrack through saves in pursuit of a more favorable outcome, if you end up with my ending, I ultimately accepted my fate, albeit wishing for perhaps a little more guidance or warnings regarding the path that I was traversing. The element of surprise here worked for me though, but I acknowledge that it may frustrate players that end up with certain endings when they expect a different outcome. I will say though that this does add some replay value to the game, even if it's just simply revisiting earlier save points to attempt to change some decisions. Overall, I found the narrative and its presentation to be quite enjoyable, and it earns a thumbs up from me. The cinematic storytelling is well done, although it can be a bit of a drag at times. However, the overall plot does remain engaging, with new and previously introduced characters reappearing just when the narrative may seem to be at one of its lower points. With plenty of twists, staying truly engaged and attentive with everything I think will only add to your experience, as the characters that you meet are, let's say, three-dimensional, as they have depth beyond initial impressions. Alright, let's delve into combat now, which I would say makes up about 50%, maybe a little bit more, of the overall experience. Initially, I felt combat was a bit awkward, but that was mostly due to unfamiliarity with the game's mechanics and just the general feel of the game. The close over-the-shoulder perspective did feel too close in the beginning, and I really felt like I wanted to pull the camera back just a little bit, but this sensation did fade over time. I chose to use a controller, which worked great for this type of combat system. Controls in this game are fairly standard for an action RPG, light and heavy attacks, blocking, and a satisfying parry mechanic that requires more precise timing. Additionally, there's a running jump attack, despite the absence of a dedicated jump button when out adventuring, along with sidestepping and double tapping sidestep to do a rolling maneuver. The roll was kind of annoying to do though, as when you double press the sidestep button, the game seems to always make your character do a sidestep before the roll. You can never just roll, but whatever, I was able to get used to that. There's also an ultimate-like attack that builds up that basically one-shots many different opponents. As the game progresses and new abilities unlock, combat becomes increasingly enjoyable. Once I got my rifle somewhat early in the game, things started to pump right up, and what's great here is that several enemies actually have different weak points, which encourages more thoughtful aiming. Remarkably, Don't Nod crafted an impactful combat feeling for both ranged and melee weapons, which I'd say is really impressive considering the spectral nature of the adversaries that you face in this game. It's impactful, yet also feels like you're hitting a ghost, if that makes sense.
I have another insight.
Combat gameplay overall feels great, and I'd say there's enough depth to keep players engaged, such as having to prioritize certain targets and also utilizing Antea's unique spectral abilities. Antea's playstyle is quite different from Red's more traditional Souls-like feel, and this offers a nice variety in combat so things don't get stagnant. If you have Spirit built up, which builds up by dealing damage with red, you can switch to Antea with the push of a button. As Antea attacks, the Spirit bar goes down, and you are then eventually forced back into red's body, or you can switch before the Spirit bar depletes. The cool thing about Antea's form is you don't actually take damage, so it offers a period of invulnerability which can be used strategically, although damage dealt to Antea does greatly deplete the Spirit bar. In terms of variety of opponents, there was not a ton, but I'd say there was enough. I'm not going to show you in the video, as discovering is part of the fun. You get, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 more major boss-like feeling battles, but the majority of opponents are these mobs of different types of ghosts, sometimes spawning a little mini-boss at the end. While I primarily played on normal difficulty to better gauge the average player experience, I still found it to be engaging and enjoyable. For those seeking a challenge, though, I would recommend higher difficulty settings, which would also incentivize you more to do exploration and side content to further power up your characters. One somewhat notable annoyance in regards to combat, though, arises when you realize that environmental traversal becomes restricted when combat starts. While this does force combat encounters to occur, which I'd say is good for most of the game, it can also prove to be quite annoying when you're revisiting areas for side content where you may just want to simply pass through, but that becomes hindered. And you also can't really assume like a high ground position when you want to. Minor complaint though. Throughout the game, I encountered 5 skill trees, each unlocking progressively as the story unfolds. However, the investment in these trees isn't exclusive. You're encouraged to invest into all of them, and you will be able to do so with ease. They follow a somewhat binary structure here, where choosing one skill unlocks the next set, allowing only one selection from each pair. You do, however, have the flexibility to switch between these pairs at any time outside of combat. Skill points earned through leveling up are allocated to red skills, while Antea skills require essence points obtained through haunting cases. During my playthrough, I ended up reaching, I think, level 19, though I'm uncertain of the max level attainable. The skill trees offer a blend of passive bonuses and active abilities, some of which allow cool combat transitions between red and Antea. While the system isn't groundbreaking, it does provide decent progression to look forward to without imposing any particularly weighty decisions, which is actually probably a negative for some players, as a lot of us like our big beefy skill trees. In addition to acquiring skills and essence points, you can gather resources from the environment and encounters, which replenish when you rest. These resources are utilized for upgrading gear, and all gear in the game can be gradually leveled up as you acquire more materials. Various unique gear pieces can be obtained primarily from chests in the game, allowing you the flexibility to choose what you want to enhance. For instance, I stumbled upon this stylish outfit midway through the game, and I decided to continuously upgrade it, using it until the end. While the upgrade path does follow a linear progression, each gear piece offers distinct attribute bonuses and affixes tailored to different playstyles. Now let's explore the game world itself without me showing you too much. Visually, the game is quite beautiful. It progressively gets nicer and nicer the further you get into the game, kind of like a lot of other aspects of this game. While facial animations and close-ups may appear somewhat rough in this game, the environments can offer some pretty incredible sights. The variety of environments is just enough to keep the experience feeling fresh without losing any sense of cohesiveness, I could say. Starting in the eerie, bleak setting of New Eden might give the impression of a bleak, depressing looking game. However, fear not, as these initial areas provide a nice contrast to some other environments that are awaiting your exploration. From coastal regions to woodlands, caves, mines, wetlands, and even snowy mountains, the game offers just enough landscape diversity to maintain excitement. At times, navigating these environments may feel somewhat linear and repetitive, as the game tends to focus more on defined pathways rather than offering fully open expanses. While I would have appreciated greater freedom to explore and cross over the environment, the world structure was still pretty engaging, and it actually surprised me by opening up much more than I initially anticipated. The audio quality in the game was pretty good, with good sound effects and solid voice acting.
Look at it. It's cold as a bishop's arse, and twice as white. I don't mind saying it, I'm very disappointed.
Charles wasn't lying.
While the soundtrack didn't particularly stand out to me, like in some other games where I stop and I just sit there listening to a song and also remembering these songs years after I finish a game, I'd say the soundtrack still served its purpose well in this game, and it complemented the haunting ambience. Moving on to performance, I played on PC with a 4080 GPU and a Ryzen 9 5900X processor, so I have a pretty good PC. When I didn't limit FPS, it seemed to hover in between 150 and 230-ish when playing on 1440p, which I'd say is pretty good. With that said, I felt like the game was actually smoother when I just capped the FPS at 72, so that's how I played, and it was pretty much always at that max of 72. I recall 2 choppy parts, which lasted for about 3 to 5 minutes each or so, but the rest of the game was really smooth. I did give this game a quick try on my less powerful laptop, which is still decent as it has a 3070 GPU, and it seemed to work fine. No idea how it will operate on less powerful machines or consoles. As far as bugs go, really minor ones. A few glitches, but this game's in really good shape. Now let's wrap up with the conclusion. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this game. Priced at $49.99 on PC, I think it offers good value for the money. While it didn't really have the strongest start ever, as in the beginning it did feel average or mid, I could say, over time it truly grew on me the more that it progressed. Things just really open up and become so much more fun. As someone who leans more towards favoring RPGs over action-adventure games like Jedi Survivor or The Last of Us, I found this game to be enjoyable, and I particularly appreciated the RPG elements such as the multiple endings, the skill trees although they were limited, and the ability to revisit locations for side activities. Rather than assigning a numerical rating, which I'm not particularly fond of doing, I describe this as an above-average action-adventure game with genuine RPG mechanics, probably more so than many other action-adventure games that use RPG in their marketing. It has a solid, engaging combat system, a dark storyline featuring, I would say, well-developed, three-dimensional characters with intriguing twists and explanations. All of this combined earns it a solid thumbs up from me. Thank you all so much for watching. I know I don't do reviews too often on this channel, but let me know if you like this content or if you even have any suggestions for improvement. Feel free to join the community Discord server, the link is below, and also consider stopping by for some live streams right here on YouTube and also on Twitch. My schedule is posted in my About section.